Okay, Algebra 2, this is where I left off with the piecewise function lesson at step 4, where you have the graph and instead you have to come up with the function. You have to write the pieces of the equation pieces that go with that function. Well, the first step is to figure out how many different equations you're going to have to write, and as you can see there are two pieces here, so I'm going to need two equations. So you're always going to have, well, it may be f of x, it could be g of x, and I'll show you that a little bit later probably in this video. But whatever label you give to that function, you're going to have that is equal to a bracket. And the bracket is going to have a certain number of blank spaces for the number of pieces that you have here. So I need to have two. And in each case, the statement at the end is going to be if x is greater than or less than or equal or something along those lines. But I have two and they should have this basic look to them. Second step is, where do they break? Well, in this case, the two that I have here break where x is equal to 0. So I know that it's going to be if x is something in relation to 0, and the other one is going to be the opposite in relation to 0. So then the question is, which arrows are underlined? Well, in the case where you only have two to choose between, you're only going to have one that's underlined and the other that's not. In this case, the left side, or in other words, less than the breaking point, is not underlined, and the right side, or in other words, to the right of the breaking point, is underlined. So that's what it should look like for this particular setup. Now you only have one more step left, which is to fill in the equations. Well, the one to the left has a slope of 1 and a y-intercept of 2. So 1x plus 2, or x plus 2 if you want to call it that. The one on the right has a y-intercept of 0, and it also has a slope of 1. So 1x plus 0, or you could simply call it x plus 0, or even just x. And that's what I've written here. That's done. That's all you need to write in terms of writing out the function based on the picture that you have in front of you. So again, remember these 4 steps. Now I'm going to give you something similar to work with. I'll spell out these 4 steps for you again, but you've got two different piecewise functions, the one below left and the one upper right here. Each of them I need you to go ahead and give me the proper function that matches the picture that I've given you. So go ahead and hit the pause button, come back, and I'll show you the answers to both. Okay, I'm going to assume that you've done that. The one on the left, you should have given me this as the piecewise function, and the one on the right here. In each case, I've indicated one thing that I had to point out to you. This one on the lower left here, notice that the two pieces meet at a point, and sometimes they will. This looks a lot like the overtime pay graph that I showed you before. In that case, it's impossible to tell just looking at the graph whether this point goes with the function, the equation to the left, or this point goes with the equation to the right. So it doesn't matter which of these two you underlined. Either of them would have been fine, but you cannot underline both. That's why I've highlighted this in yellow to remind myself to say this isn't actually right. One of these should be underlined and the other should not, and it's up to you to have chosen which one. But notice that they break where y is -1. In both cases, -1 is my y-intercept. The one to the left has a slope of 1 over 2, or 1/2. The one to the right becomes steeper. It has a slope of 1 over 1, or 1. So those are the two equations that go with that function. This function, it breaks where x is 2, but in that case, they don't actually meet at that spot. And the one to the right, notice the one to the right does not include x is 2. So make sure you said for the one where x is greater than 2 that it wasn't underlined. Second thing I wanted to point out, this probably wasn't so terribly easy to figure out what the equation was for the right piece. And what you had to do was extend that out. And what I usually do is actually pull out a ruler and draw that line. But it looks like, even without the ruler, like the y-intercept for this one is at -4, and that's what I've written here, x minus 4. Okay, so that's it for the piecewise function lesson. If you can remember when you are writing the equations for the picture that you see, to break it into these 4 steps, how many different equations are in that piecewise function, where do those pieces break from each other, which arrows should be underlined, and then simply go ahead and fill in the equations for each of the ones that you identified in step 1, you shouldn't have too terribly much trouble. This is the homework assignment. As you can see, it's a worksheet. It's on the website announced with this video, so you can print it out from the website. You can also get a copy from me.